Welcome back to DAP Books Podcast. I'm your host, Willie Roberry, and today on the second episode of DAP Books, we have with us a legendary climber and author who has published several books with us, including Granite Mariner, Icarus Syndrome, and Rogues Atlas, 66 flash fiction stories. John Long.
Yes, ma'am.
It's great to have you here.
It's always fun to be around Willie Roberry.
Yeah, this is going to be a weird thing because I feel like I'm too casual to be interviewing you. So this is just going to be a little chat we have.
A conversation?
A little conversation. A way for me to know more details about you because I've realized that I don't actually know enough. You've published books with us since 2021, I think, is when Icarus Syndrome came out.
I think right at the start of the pandemic, whenever
Right
that was.
at the start of the pandemic. Could you?
It was like 2020.
2020.
Yeah.
That's probably when it started. It
Yeah.
released in 2021, but that predates me.
Yeah.
So could you tell us how you got involved with D'Angelo Publications?
How did I get? I was at I think I was at a screening of Solo.
Oh.
The Academy Award-winning
Of course.
documentary on Alex Honnold free soloing, like climbing El Cap without a rope,
Mhm.
and that was a big event. And Sequoia was there, and she was there with Dean Feidelman. They went back a ways. Dean's a big action photographer, but he also worked with Italian Vogue for 10 years. So he takes all kinds of interesting photos, and he had been a friend of Sequoia's for I don't know how long. Introduced, and she had that, she's like a turbocharged agent style person, right?
It's true.
2 minutes into it, it's like, what can we do, right? We got to start doing a project because she's there. And one thing led to the next, and we started working on a book, and that was that.
So you first met Sequoia just a few years ago?
Yeah.
Oh, I was under the impression that you knew her as long as Feidelman had.
No, I didn't. I knew her dad and her brother because they were famous, Himalayan mountaineers.
Mm.
Or I knew of them. Tragically, both were killed on K2, world's second highest mountain. So I knew that story, and I'd heard of Sequoia, but I'd never met her in person, and had no this, that, or the other thing to do with her.
Huh. So
That was the first time.
I didn't know that's how you met.
Yeah.
That's kind of cool. And then
Immediately, it was a hard press to, what are we going to do, right? What project?
so she knew you as an author
Yeah.
already. Oh, fantastic. So
I think Dean had it in mind that we were going to do, that's why Dean's always trying to figure out the next project. So we'd done a couple pretty good ones, and Sequoia was a good match for us as a publisher. So
Mhm.
here we are.
yeah, I'm glad you stuck
And
with us.
then you came along.
I came along when you actually flew into Twin Falls for a speaking event at a climbing gym in my local town, Twin Falls, Idaho. This
Yeah, it was part of a big tour and book tour thing.
one of the stops was just
Yeah,
a
yeah.
small town.
And while I was there, I had to sign 5,000 books in your warehouse. Oh my God!
It was
You
not
realize how many-
5,000.
No, it was a crazy amount, though. I was there all day signing those
It
things.
was a lot.
I was trying to get other people to sign my name for me.
Mhm. We
Like, oh
stuck
boy.
you in the warehouse.
Yeah, you don't realize
You
how
were
boring
just
that is.
down there signing. That was the first time I had met you, because I didn't work on Icarus Syndrome at all. That was
Cody.
Cody and Ashley. I'd like to think that our publishing firm is a little special in the sense that you can form close relationships with each of the person who's worked on your books because you've published books before. And through those firms, did you have a close relationship with any of the people you
Yeah,
Yeah?
not usually with bigger companies. There's more of a press to get the thing done, right? So it's always like bottom line, editors are expensive. Try to get through it as quickly as you can. Be efficient, And working with D'Angelo, it's like a custom kind of thing. First and foremost is how good can we make this thing,
Mhm.
and that's not something that you encounter much in today's world. Is how good you can make it for the least amount of money. right? And it's not that finances aren't an issue, but you want to get the product dialed, and that takes time. It's just there's no way around it.
It's true.
And I've done 50 something books. I haven't had another job my entire adult life other than writing. So, uh, it's just always time consuming.
Always time consuming
Yeah.
to write it. You made them great. They're great books.
Well, I wasn't alone. I had a lot of help. And that to answer your question, people at D'Angelo has been editorial staff's been spectacular. I mean, they really stuck with me through thick and thin, and a lot of arguments and going back and forth. Now you got to get rid of this. Now, all of that. But it was all. Everybody was committed to trying to do as good a job as we could, and that's a great thing to be a part of.
You understood the assignment, John Long. I was fishing for compliments, and you gave them.
Oh, did I?
Thanks.
No, that's really actually been my experience. I have no, I don't have to pimp a product or any of that stuff. I mean, those things will live or die on how good they are, not relative to what I'm, talking about them.
That's really great to hear. We in the company kind of love you for how well you speak of us to outside people. I mean, you have brought in other authors to us, which it's great for us just to have someone of such a notable presence.
Hey,
Speak so
the
highly of
thing is,
us.
any professional that gets around people that really give a shit about what you're doing, like actually, it's like, man, we're doing this thing to the T or to the 10th degree, you're going to be excited about that. That's not something you see much right now. It's, things are disposable. It's the next thing. It's the next. It's the next. It's like, no, a book's supposed to be something that's going to last for a while, centuries. Somebody's going to pick this up and go, well, what kind of effort was this? Is there anything memorable in here? What about, what do they encapsulate? Why did anybody bother spend their life doing anything like this if it didn't matter, later on? Is it of value? You're trying to do something that has legs, that'll last.
Yeah. It's like it'll transcend past you.
Yeah.
It'll go past your lifetime. It'll stay just as relevant after you're gone.
Hopefully.
Hopefully. I mean, I feel like we've done our best to achieve that with every book you've published.
Yeah, you can
for
pick up.
us.
You want something where people can pick up something, dive into it, and dream a little dream.
Dream a little dream.
Yeah.
Sequoia had mentioned that you're currently working on a show, a documentary.
Steve Schwartz does independent. He's an independent producer and has done a lot of really interesting movies with stars too, like Brad Pitt and what have you. And I think the last big one he did was turned out to be the most watched movie on Netflix last year. So yeah, he does good stuff, and he had an adventure background himself. And it must have been a decade ago, we started talking about doing something. We exchanged ideas back and forth, and I wrote some scripts and this and that. I could never get anything that really worked. I'm a prose writer. I've worked in TV and movies a bunch, but it's not my wheelhouse. Script writing is not my wheelhouse. But I sort of stuck with the whole thing, and then finally, a couple of months ago, we picked it back up and started brainstorming. I had another sort of angle. I was working with Jeff Jackson, my writing partner, for many years, and we finally came up with something. I go, hey, this is going to work. And as of yesterday, I was talking to Steve. He's going, we're doing this. So, we'll see. You never know until you're on, basically on the set filming it. But it's looking pretty good, actually. So that's going to be fun to do another big Hollywood movie. That would be interesting.
You said another big Hollywood movie?
Yeah, we've done a couple in the past. Stallone movies. It's been quite a while, and I didn't have the greatest experience doing those. I'm not really like a Hollywood dude.
No, I couldn't tell.
You got to be a lot smoother than I am to exist in that.
You have so much star quality.
Yeah, but I always love the narratives. I love big projects, so I don't have any excuses.
How did you go from like riding, climbing, these things? Because you started writing with journals, right? Publishing journals first.
Yeah, when I was in undergraduate school,
Mhm.
I started writing in climbing magazines and journals
Mhm.
because I was real good at climbing, and naturally publications wanted to hear about what we were doing. So I had an opportunity there, since I was studying creative writing and humanities. Might as well write about what I knew. I
Right.
had direct experience doing, so I could write about that stuff from the beginning and had a platform. And I didn't care whether it was about writing or walking a dog. I just wanted to get stuff published,
Mhm.
right? To get hooked into that world. So I started with climbing, and it just sort of took off from there.
Yeah. So how did you go from that start to working in Hollywood?
Because it's all storytelling. It's all narratives. Just because you have something you're good at, or you worked in this genre, doesn't mean that you can't move sideways into something else. If you understand the art of narrative storytelling, you can traverse it virtually anywhere. It's like telling a photographer, "Well, you've always shot fashion, so how do you go from that to shooting landscape?" It's all photography, right?
Mm.
So you
Good.
just do it.
You just do
You
it.
know, I mean, if you understand the vocabulary of it,
That's true, I guess.
yeah, you have to study it, and you have to get jiggy with what what the terrain is. But once you get some kind of native feel for what you're trying to do, then you should be able to execute if you have skill.
Ugh, and
Can't
you.
be intimidated by it. I mean, it's just us people, right?
I like that. It's just us people.
Yeah, just us people,
Oh.
and and the things that we normally attribute to success and stardom, or talent or whatever. Okay, the person's got to be this, that, he's got to be this color, he's got to be this, with this education, it has to be this age, has to be this, gender, has none of that has anything to do with churning out meaningful material, because it's all human beings doing stuff.
Mhm.
Does it resonate or not? And if it's really good, it'll work across all platforms. And that's what you want. Evergreen, universal stuff.
Recently, you were approached by Jared Leto at a climbing gym, I believe. Someone told me. Does that happen often? Are you like are you recognized by just people of all sorts and approached because you're so well known? Because you're so
Legendary.
great? Because you're legendary?
Yeah,
Tom?
yeah, I am. But you live a little while and you realize it's just people, man. That's what it is, and it's just somebody interested in you, and you're just as interested in them, probably, right? It doesn't mean anything other than just human interest. And if you keep it in those terms, then it doesn't become what it's not, which is something other than just human connection. That's what you're trying for in all of this stuff.
You're turning this.
I'm sorry?
You're turning this into like a really philosophical thing, which is everything that we do is just for the enjoyment of our human lives, and other humans are bound to enjoy it as well.
Yeah, I mean, you have to make a living, right? So
Right.
it has to be commercially viable. But those are the parameters you got to work within. But what are you doing within those parameters? If you're just trying to make money, that's not going to be enough for. If you're an artist, you began doing stuff because you loved it,
Mhm.
not because not you. You didn't start scribbling out drawings or writing little stupid stories or poems, or or taking photos or whatever, immediately thinking, I'm going to be a billionaire one day doing this. No, you're doing it because you're interested in doing it, right?
Mhm.
And if it leads to that, okay, great. But if that original spark isn't there, if the interest, soul level interest, isn't inherent in what you're doing, it's going to show. Going to show.
You're right.
Yeah.
There's
no way around it. You cannot bluff that part of it. And if it's not there, I don't know how it's going to be meaningful, or how are you going to be successful.
What else do you love to do, John Long? I know you're an author. You've always loved writing. That's always been your path. You're a climber. You love to climb.
Yeah, and just adventure sports.
How did you get into that?
I grew up wanting to do all the crazy outdoor stuff that I had ever seen. And from as far back as, as I can remember, the cowboys and Indian movies, I wanted to be like an Indian out there in a canoe, going over waterfalls and, with the Tommy Hawk and the whole thing, all of that exciting stuff, right?
Mhm.
Outdoors. I don't know. Maybe if I had a more mature character, I wouldn't have, but I didn't. So I love that, all of that stuff. And so I saw people running rivers and climbing mountains and doing all those things. And my understanding from the beginning was those are just people doing that. And I'm a person. Hey, I want to do that. And so from the earliest possible age that I could get out and start doing that stuff, I did. And one of the first jobs I got when I was 15, wasn't even 16, was working on for a raft company that was taking trips down the Grand Canyon.
Oh.
I was just like a step and fetch it kind of, pot scrubber, gopher kind of. But hey, man, I got to go down the Grand Canyon and bounce through all these great rapids and, be amongst explorers, or at least what I thought were, it was an adventure.
Mhm.
Big time too. I mean, there's 50-foot waves in that thing, man. That's a wild river going through the Grand Canyon. And on one of those trips, there were some Sierra Club people, one of which was a rock climbing instructor. And he started talking about stuff they did in Yosemite. And there was rocks around. And he showed me some little bouldering moves and what have you. And it got my mind sort of moving in that direction. So as soon as I went home, I started checking out books. And because I lived in Southern California, there was climbing around in some way,
Mhm.
shape, or form. There's a Sierra Club I could learn. I could take lessons, and I did. And I got some other friends, and we started doing it. And it was really that simple.
It was that simple, yet you started like you were a part of the Stone Masters.
Well, there wasn't any stone masters. What it was is that at the time is just by luck, a convergent point there was like 24 people from all around Southern California that got to climbing at the same time. They were very ambitious and they're real athletic. And all of a sudden we started commingling and we got this synergy and, really started going after it. And everybody had that capacity to be able to, in any field, you have people who are going to find the other people in the field that are good and they're going to end up together. And when they do, interesting stuff can happen, whether it's in music or car design or motorcycle racing or rock climbing. So the Nike Center or like the heart and soul, the access point, the North Star of all climbing in the United States was in Yosemite Valley. So we all migrated there when we were 16, 17, started going there all the time in the summers. And, the rest is history. Just had at it, man, big time.
It's really amazing that you could fill your life with the things you loved, like climbing and writing, and they could coexist. And I mean, a lot of your stories that you've written were about climbing, like you said, because you write what you know at first, but then they become these transcendental stories that you can then share with everyone who, even if they aren't climbers, they feel it, they understand it.
Yeah, I don't know how intentional any of that stuff is. It's just sort of the stories just take you where they take you. Yeah, it's a mysterious thing. I don't know. You just jump in there and see where it goes, right? But take it seriously and be surrounded by good people and, work at it, get an education, follow it, read up, immerse yourself in it, know the vocabulary of the genre. Those are all pretty standard steps you do in anything. If somebody's going to be an architect, you learn all about it. You don't just sit down and go, I'm gonna get some graph paper and start designing myself a crib. It didn't work like that. Right?
Right. You're not wrong, John Long. I don't think you ever are.
What's that? No, you kidding.
I
Not
am.
wrong. Oh, God. Most of the success or whatever success I've had has been at the expense of making gigantic mistakes.
Ooh, tell us about your mistakes.
No
No one ever likes talking about that, but I want to know.
I'll tell you the like Yosemite was the place that when I was a kid, that's where you went. That's where it's like if you were a jazz musician in the 40s, you went to Harlem, right? Because that's where all the good musicians and that's where you could make a living, and that was where it was happening. Well, climber in the 70s, a budding superstar climber, went to Yosemite because that's where all the big cliffs were. Cap, Half Dome, Sentinel, Watkins, all of it. All those big formations were there. That's where you're going to make your mark. So I went there thinking, okay, I'm going to be the next rock star. I'm like 16, right? Then I got there and saw how big that stuff is. Even from miles away, it just looks like, and then you go to the bottom and maybe you see somebody up there that look like an ant, right? They're 2,500 feet above, like more than 3/4 of a mile above you. There's a human being hanging on this wall. And you're looking up there going, this is what I signed on for? No, I didn't. The fuck of I'm ever going up there. It scares the crap out of me just looking at it, right? And so, that was probably the first mistake I made in the whole game was going there thinking that I'm ready for this. I'm just going to jump onto it. No, man. It took me a year and a half of just being there before I could even look at El Cap and go, maybe. And I held off. I got up there when I was 18. By that time, I was so good that it didn't feel like it was that much. But I waited quite a while. It took a long time to get used to my ignorant thinking that I was going to be able to just go up there. And I actually tried it a few times before I made it. First time I got up there, I witnessed a bad accident. Somebody got killed. Body went whipping by. I go, forget this. I'm done with this sport. Went down and then I reconsidered. And then next year I went back up and did it. So, and then I just kept doing it, big climbs. But massive amount of failures and, false starts and all kinds of stuff. Yeah, there's just no way around it because there's so many variables. You got weather, you got fatigue, you got injury, you have, the route you plan isn't going to work out, especially if you're doing new things. So any kind of exploration, and we were big into doing that, any kind of exploration, meaning you're the first to go up somewhere, those things are just not always going to work out. You can do the research that you want in advance and scope the thing and look at it with the binoculars and talk to other people and, get a look at it from a bunch of different angles and climb things to the left and the right of it and look over. But it doesn't mean it's going to be, what you're thinking. You don't know until the moment of engagement whether this is right or not, just like most things, right?
Have you ever wanted to accomplish it so badly that you did something like stupid or dangerous?
Quite a bit.
How do you navigate that? When is it too far, or when is it far enough for you to admit, like, okay, I need to go back?
Well, you develop on any of these adventure sports. If you're going to be around for a while, you develop a pretty good risk management sort of gauge. You can try to figure out. You understand what you're doing, understand what the objective dangers are, so far as you can understand them. You're dealing with the unknown. And the uncertainty that comes up in that is really what electrifies the whole thing. It's the fact you really don't know. Can I do this? Nobody's ever done it before. What makes me think I can do it? Well, because I've done things that look like this and, and I'm game and I'm fit and I'm got a bunch of, a couple partners that are world class. If somebody's going to do it. It's going to be us, right? You have to have that mindset. But nevertheless, you get up there and it might be too dangerous or the rock might be crappy or the weather's not up to it, or you're just not feeling it. A combination of things undeniably come to the fore. You can't, if you're at all sane, the internal signals are, this is not good, dude. You need to get out of here, right? And if you can hear that voice, and it'll scream at you if you're sort of in touch with what's going on.
That's interesting.
You have to come back or just forget it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Another one is I'm not ready for this. I have to I'm gonna have to put it off because everybody, when you put a bunch of effort into something, you want the immediate gratification of being able to do it.
Mhm.
I don't want to postpone because it's a pain in the ass to get everything together, packed up. You hump everything up there, you start it up. You're hauling all this like a piano up this rock wall because you have to have gear and all that.
Mhm.
You got people have driven up. You got all of that. It's an ordeal, right?
Mhm.
And you get up there a ways, and you're like, hey, I'm not up for this. I'm not good enough yet. You want to really, I have to wait till I'm better to come back? Yeah. Or you're going to get hurt. And it's self-limiting in that, right? Like there used to be that. I remember when I started, there was people would say, well, climbing, you can't go out and do dangerous looking things so that other people are going to see that and try to think it's okay. And they're going to go, no, climbing doesn't work like that. Because as soon as you get on something vertical and it's over your head, you know it, right?
Mm.
You know it, and something inside of normal people will start screaming, you're going to get killed here, right? If you don't get off of this thing right now, it's going to be big trouble. Regardless of what anybody else has done and what you saw and what you thought you could do, the fact is right now, you're up against it and you can't do this. Right, it's very obvious, and so that's what I meant by self-limiting. It's not like you have free choice. You can just try anything. A lot of these things you can't even try them; they're too hard. Can't even get anywhere. It's like riding a unicycle. Most sports you can sort of do. I can ski for 10 feet and I fall over, or I can I haven't played basketball. I can at least huck the ball up towards unicycle. You can't even sit on it.
Right.
Can't even pedal one stroke. Right? And it's just sort of the same way with climbing. Once it gets to a certain level, you can't even start to do it.
I like hearing you talk about this as a seasoned climber because I went climbing once, like a couple months ago.
At a Joshua Tree, right?
At Joshua Tree, yeah, with a couple people.
Very experienced people, as I remember.
Very experienced people. I had not climbed even a rock wall at a climbing gym before. So it was the very first climb we did, it was a 5.7, it was a crack, and I felt like I did so great. And then after that climb, I couldn't do any of the other ones. But we had increased in the difficulty. But I remember the second day, my fingers were raw. I had never climbed before, so my body wasn't used to it. And my legs were a little shaky, and I couldn't rely on my own body. Like I couldn't. The day before, since I was in perfect condition previously, I knew what I could do. But the next day, I was so unsure of what I could push myself to do because I knew the day before that I could push myself and do it. But this day, if I pushed myself, I worried I'd fall, which isn't a big deal. It's not dangerous when you're climbing, especially what I was climbing.
Yeah, you got a rope from above. Nevertheless, no, I understand what you're saying. Yeah, climbing is a weird sport because you can't. I mean, gymnastics somewhat translates. You can sort of go sideways from that, but you're not using your body in the same way that you do climbing. You're not using in any other sport. You're not pulling up on your fingers and standing on a little thing with you. It's unlike anything else. Physically, not completely unlike, but enough unlike. It's unlike. It's its own thing insofar as if you're not used to it, it doesn't matter how good of shape you're in, it's going to cook you. Your fingers are going to get all beat up, and you're just not your calves and everything. You get that internal shake, and then it gets the mental part of it is like, what am I doing? I don't know what blah, blah, blah. It's real foreign. It takes. You can get over that fairly quickly if you have good instruction, but the beginning stuff, and you bet you might as well enjoy. I always tell people it's like anything else. You really want to enjoy, be conscious of the fact when you're starting out in any of these things that you're a rank beginner, and the exhilaration you get, the experience you get from knowing nothing about it, that's only going to happen once because the learning curve is real steep. You learn how to do that stuff very quickly. A couple of weeks with somebody who knows what they're doing, you're going to feel way different than the first couple of days. So enjoy being a complete you know, rookie or grom or whatever term you want to newbie, whatever term you want to use. Enjoy being that because you're not going to be that for very long. If you're physically fit, if you're not, you can't you can't do it. That it's very exclusionary in that sense. You have to be fit.
Yeah, it's taxing.
Yeah. It's not one of those things that an out of shape person could sort of do. You can't do it at all, really.
Mm. That's good to know. And the mental toll will hit newbies probably the strongest, but even an experienced climber like you knows when it's too
Yeah,
That's good to know.
Yeah, the mental game, that's because how many times did I see people who physically they could have been heroic, what they could have done, but they didn't have the head for it. They didn't stay with it long enough to develop the wherewithal to be able to deal with old man gravity or to be up on the steep for hours, sometimes days at a time. You have to, that's a learned skill. Nobody is comfortable at the beginning being way up on a vertical rock because internally it's like that's dangerous. You have to get over that.
Mm-hmm. How long did it take you to get over that?
Maybe a couple seasons, probably. I mean, you get used to being up there, sort of, pretty much straight up. But then, as soon as you start doing stuff that has real scale, like really big magnitude stuff, and it's steep enough that you can drop a piton or drop a carabine or some piece of gear, and it will free fall for many, many, many seconds before it even hits anything. You keep listening and listening, and then you hear a clink, clink. You go, that's you if you come off of this, right? And you know it. So, yeah, there's never a dull moment on a big rock climber. No matter how casually you can get, because gravity is going to keep pushing you down. So, you got to have the guard up. That's why you're exhausted when you get to the top of stuff.
That makes
mentally, you're like, whoop, you got to be on.
Got to be on.
Got to be on.
Have you ever, I don't know the answer to this, have you ever been injured?
Yeah.
From climbing? Oh, how long? So after the recovery of it, did you have to go through a learning curve again to get back into things?
A little bit, not too much. I broke my leg really bad.
Oh, how?
Fell, hit the ground.
Oh, you did fall?
Yeah. Shin bones went shooting right through my shin. Open fracture, in the hospital 2 months.
2 months for a broken leg. Oh, but that's just in the hospital.
I didn't break my leg. I blew it up. See that right there? That's a muscle. That right there, that glump, that's a muscle they cut out of my upper leg and transplanted into there because I had a big hole in my leg. Yeah. Oh, yeah. Not dangerous. It's not safe. Climbing is not safe.
Climbing is not safe.
And I'd done 40 years of it before that happened. I'm like, darn. How did that happen? Yeah.
Oh, John.
But it did.
Were you just being unsafe? I can't imagine that.
It's just a long story, But yeah, pilot error.
Pilot error.
Yeah, pilot error. Yep.
That's a great way to describe it.
I was talking to, I'm a rock climber mainly. I don't like really doing alpine stuff because I grew up in Southern California and it's warm. So I don't like alpine ice, snow stuff. I just don't like the cold. Sorry. No, I'm not really sorry at all. I just don't like it. And anyway, the alpine stuff, the big mountain stuff, that's even more dangerous because you got objective dangers you never have in fair weather thing. You got avalanches, rock, a lot of rockfall, avalanche danger, as I said, all of that, plus altitude problems and freezing and all, and I had to give a talk up in Santa Barbara recently, and I saw an old friend of mine that I grew up with, Mike Graham, another one of the original Stonemasters, very good climber in his day. And we were just trying to remember all the mountaineers that we grew up with, originally rock climbers, and they went into that. Much more greater percentage than half of them got killed. Yeah. I mean, you're talking about people really going for it, right? I mean, originally, the conversation we were talking about somebody that we really grew up with, Tobin Sorensen, who got killed up in the Canadian Rockies, and it was like, hey, Tobin did all of these great things. As the director done the Eiger and the thing on Grand Jaras, and all of these different things. And hey, remember all of his partners on all those things? They're all dead. Tobin and all of his partners on all of these things we just mentioned, virtually all of them are dead. They died somewhere in the Himalayas or something. So that's that alpine climbing game at the top level is really a crapshoot. That's a white elephant in the room. That's dangerous shit, man. You got to really, really be careful. And even then, it doesn't matter. You can get pulmonary edema and just kill you in an hour.
Mm-hmm. The physical onslaught of and it's just your body's not used to things. So
even if it's used to it, it can still hit you.
Oh.
Yeah, it's a weird thing. It's not a safe thing, or it's not something you can do indefinitely. Climb above about 24,000 feet without oxygen and not run into problems here and there. Mm-hmm. Some people are freakish. They have a super high H2O intake capacity, right? But even those people, those are the ones that are the best marathon runners and all of that. Even those people, they can go down owing to who knows? They got a little virus or something. Wrong time, a little tired, bam. It happens.
This is a very...
Yeah, no, it's a serious thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, adventure sports at the top level. There's no way to justify it. If the normal criteria for justification is, are you putting yourself in harm's way? Why would you do that, right?
Why would you do that? Why do you do that?
No answer. If you have to ask that question, no answer is good enough. It isn't, right? You can only discover why you would do that by doing it.
And you have.
Yeah.
Hopefully most.
Well, I mean, it's electrifying. It makes you feel alive. It's, some people like those kind of challenges. And the Icarus syndrome, to see how close to the sun I can fly. Mm-hmm. That's a very interesting place to be, right? But you can also die there. So can you justify it? You can't.
Yeah, that's true. I don't know this for certain, but I feel like you're pretty fortunate in the sense that you're 70 years old and you're very healthy, it seems. How do you stay so healthy? I feel like most climbers actually do, because as you said before, you have to be healthy. You have to be fit in order.
Well, I'm an exercise nut, and I watch what I eat. Huh. And a long time ago, I quit doing drinking, drugs, all of that. So I'm pretty straight edged, sleep, take care of myself.
Got it.
That's how. And genetics, I guess. But, at some point, you got to stop. You have to look to try to answer. You ask this question, how do you stay healthy? You got to look at what you can control and make a conscious decision. Okay, I know that I'm going to have to keep my weight around here. I have to watch my diet. I have to get enough rest. I have to, the nutrition. I have to have some kind of you have to have some kind of practice, whether it's a meditation practice or go to church or you do yoga, or you have to have something that's going to ground you in something other than just me, myself, and I show. And I also think you have to do some kind of community service, so it's not all about you. Those things keep you relevant, and no matter how old you get.
So you've stayed grounded.
Yeah, it's an effort, right? Because I'm naturally not grounded at all.
So as you've been practicing that, have you done different things to stay that way? Like, how do you stay grounded now versus when you first started climbing, or, I don't know, even 20 years ago?
Well, climbing will ground you because it's so visceral and so physical, and you're dealing with physical existence on such a primitive primary level, gravity, sun, air, rock, grabbing something. It demands you to be fully present, which is a big plus, right? I'm here. I'm alive. I'm here. I'm alive. All of that. So anything that does that, whether it's riding the bike and walking on the beach, it doesn't really matter as long as you learn how to be here now. Basically, your life's going to make sense I think if you keep doing that, and you're relevant as long as you do things for other people.
For the people, and it all circles back because we're all just humans here, and it's all for the people.
Removing all the labels is another big one, and that was necessary. That I learned in climbing too. Oh, this is too hard. This is this. Oh, only this person can do that. But you forget all that. Just look at it with fresh eyes and see what you can do. So no labels, no story. Just enter it new.
That's great. That's actually a great thing to hear someone say as a climber, because I feel like a lot of people are motivated by the competition. Like, oh, this person did this, I can do it better, or I can do it faster, or I can do it, which I feel like is really when it starts to get.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, that kind of motivation can get you going, but that's not going to see you through. The only thing that can see you through is your love for what you're doing, because it's too demanding otherwise and too scary. You really have to believe in what you're doing, and external prompts like, oh, he did it, she did it, that's not going to be enough ultimately. You've got to really want to do what you're doing.
That's great.
Yeah.
I mean, it's great that it's persisted so long for you.
Maybe I can't speak for everyone in that regard, but it was never enough for me. If I'm up there going, Jumping Jack Flash did this, heck to hell with him, I'm doing it. I'm going to get up there and about, I get 100 feet off the ground. If that's all that's motivating me, I'm like, fuck Jumping Jack Flash. I'm not feeling this, man. I got to get out of here, right? So we got to be self-motivated, basically.
So, John Long.
Yes, ma'am.
Before you go,
okay,
we'd like you to read one of the stories from your latest publication with D'Angelo, which is Granite Mariner.
Okay.
It is called...
Which one?
Dr. Brown.
Oh, at least you picked a shorty. I remember it.
I bookmarked it for you.
Oh, you bookmarked it for me? Oh, you had this all worked out, did you? Dr. Brown. Yeah.
Okay.
3¼ pages. Yeah, I can do this one. Dr. Brown. An intern found the scratchy 16-inch 33 1/3 RPM Vitaphone soundtrack disc in the bottom of a steamer trunk. For 70 years, it had gathered dust in the basement of the Malibu City Library, which has one of the finest collections of mountaineering texts in the U.S. The narrator on the Malibu disc, Damon Runyon, recounts the life of a doctor and amateur mountain climber named Nathan Brown, whose ancestors purportedly arrived on the Mayflower. By 1850, the Browns grew more Virginia tobacco than anyone and had 4 family members in Congress. During the Great Depression, while Nathan's stepfather served in the U.S. Embassy in Mexico, the family relocated to Mexico City. Here, young Nathan learned Spanish and, on weekends, joined several young embassy staffers for aventuras de escalada on the towering volcanoes north of the capital. Nathan also favored bullfighting, mezcal, and girlfriends lured from the untouchable peon class. All of this reflected poorly on the ambassador, so at 18, Nathan was shipped back to Virginia for college. Nathan excelled in school, but there were incidents. Nevertheless, Nathan finished his medical studies and was immediately found in flagrante with the daughter of the pathology professor, a fierce man who launched a crusade against Nathan and his family. Nathan's stepfather, recently returned from Mexico City, gave him $300 and showed him the door. If Nathan was at all honorable, he would leave forever. Nathan went into the study and threw a dart at a map of the United States. The first toss stuck in Pennsylvania. He removed the dart and threw it again. This time it stuck in Arizona. Nathan scanned the map, saw 12,600-foot Humphreys Peak, and was on the next train heading west. 9 days later, standing on top of the peak, he gazed out over the plains. These mountains and this broad and empty land would have to do. Nathan made his way to Flagstaff, then just a wide spot in the road, or he let a room above a dry goods store and had opened up shop. One of his first patients, a woodworker who'd lost a finger in a lathe, made him a little wooden sign that he tacked to the bottom of the staircase. Dr. Brown, office upstairs. Town managers thought he should work out of the local clinic, but Dr. Brown continued seeing patients in his little room above the dry goods store. The many Mexican immigrants living in the dusty barrios just outside of town had no problem with Dr. Brown or his office. Here was a doctor who spoke their language and didn't require cash money. Frijoles, sopa de albondigas, chickens, anything would do, and no one was turned away. Rumors persisted. Dr. Brown liked playing cards and drinking tequila with undesirables. Dr. Brown and his Mexican house cleaner were known to share the same bed. Dr. Brown stole medicines from the clinic and sold them to the poor, which is only half true. He gave the medicine away. And every week, Dr. Brown risked his life in the mountains. The park ranger himself told how the doctor had climbed every surrounding mountain 100 different ways, usually alone, never using any safety equipment. Dr. Brown would trudge back to from his mountains to find the infirm sitting on the stairs of his office. Then the daughter of a local merchant went and fell in love with Dr. Brown, and the two were to be married. An engagement banquet was arranged, and important people invited from as far away as Phoenix and Prescott. Here was the chance to draw the doctor back into society, where his talents could be appreciated and rewarded. But on the morning of the banquet, Dr. Brown was called away by a Navajo man who said his daughter was ill. It was a long ride. The girl had dysentery, and over the next few days, the doctor nearly lost her several times. When he returned to town, his fiancée's father met him on the stairs with a Colt 45. He would not have the reckless doctor as his son-in-law, who was forced at gunpoint to beg for his life. For the first time in memory, the doctor went to a saloon in the barrio north of town and was thrown out for borrachera y pelea, drunkenness and fighting. He left for the mountains that day. 2 days later, a storm hit Humphreys Peak just as the doctor reached the summit. Or so the rangers figured. On his way down, he apparently ran into a three-man party in bad shape. They were stranded and unprepared for the storm. Evidence suggested the doctor tried to get the three down the mountain in the snowstorm, which lasted 2 days and 2 nights. The youngest victim, a boy of 14, was wearing the doctor's hat and parka when they found the four bodies frozen into the slope. Dr. Nathan Brown was 31 years old. The sheriff discovered the doctor barely had enough money in the bank to buy a pine coffin, with nothing left over for the burial. They needed to get this business quickly over, so the town manager alerted a few of the doctor's acquaintances to dig a hole on the flanks of the cemetery, which they managed the first day. An old Navajo man and 2 Mexicans lowered Dr. Brown's coffin into the ground with a rope. The woodworkers shoveled rubbly earth onto the coffin and planted a wooden cross. Then the small group wandered off for home. All but the woodworker, who sat down and stared at the grave. For a man like Dr. Brown, a fancy marble headstone was not quite right. And who could afford one anyhow? But 2 scraps of 2x4 nailed into a cross wouldn't do either. Then the woodworker remembered. For many years afterwards, when someone wandered out to the rocky edge of the cemetery to have a smoke or relieve themselves, they'd come across a grave marked by a simple cross upon which hung a little wooden sign, Dr. Brown, office upstairs.
Thank you for reading for us,
You're very
Mr.
welcome.
John Long. No, I need to close out. I need to close out.
We need to close out?
Yeah.
Okay, how do we close this out?
Well, I thank you for coming.
Oh, you're very welcome. It's a pleasure.
And thank you, everyone, for listening or watching, if you are. This has been John Long on our second episode of DAP Books Podcast. If you are interested in purchasing Granite Mariner or any of his other books, be sure to check out our website, dapbooks.shop. And be sure to follow along on the podcast. We upload every other week. And
are you going to be at the helm for the duration?
Oh, I'm not sure. It'll mostly be me, but maybe Sequoia will take a couple interviews here and there if I'm.
Oh, come on, Willie.
Okay.
Get over
Thank
yourself.
Thank you all for listening.
Get over your own self, Willie Roberry.
Thank you all for listening. Sit down. There's a camera. Okay. You're blocking it. Thank you all for listening. Be sure to follow along We are DAP Books Pod on Instagram and D'Angelo Publications everywhere else. We'll see you again 2 weeks from now.
Am I coming back in 2 weeks? No.
No, not you, John Long.
Oh, come on.
The next guest.
There's other people but me?
I think that's fine. Honestly, that's the best we're going to get, John Long.